White text on a gray background reads, hashtag NoBodyIsDisposable, Deej. The Longmore Institute on Disability, Superfest, and Making Change Media for the hashtag NoBodyIsDisposable Summer Film Series. Also sponsored by the San Francisco Senior and Disability Action, the hashtag NoBodyIsDisposable Coalition, the California Care Rationing Coalition, Fat Rose, Disability Rights, Education, and Defense Fund, and the Detroit Disability Power.
Great, thank you all. And I see the participant number has increased, so thank you for folks who had to move between rooms from the non-AD room back in here. We're glad you came back. With that, I will pass it over to Soreigh Acevedo, who has generously agreed to be our moderator for the session. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sara Maria Acevedo, and welcome. We're super excited to be here together and with you. I am a mestiza educator and disability justice activist and scholar. I was born and raised in Colombia, and I came here for graduate school, disability studies. I am going to share a little bit about my description. I am a brown woman with pale skin. I have a short light brown bob with pink highlights, and I'm wearing thick frame cat glasses with a tiger pattern, and I'm wearing a white satin shirt. So like I was saying, I'm super excited to be here together with my two friends and colleagues, DJ and Latif. We all know each other, and we are here to talk about themes and topics that we are all passionate about, so it's exciting. So I want to start by first asking DJ and Latif to introduce themselves and to briefly share how they see their contribution to the NoBodyIsDisposable campaign.
Hi, I am Latif McCloud, and for my audio description, I am a black man with cerebral palsy. I have my hair in a low-cut fade style, and I have a mustache and beard. I am wearing a button-up shirt, and I am in a permobile power wheelchair. I am a PhD candidate in the Anthropology and Social Change program at California Institute for Integral Studies, and also the vice president of the lead committee at the International Society for Augmentative and Alternative Communication. My work ties into the #NoBodyIsDisposable campaign because my work affirms that disabled lives, especially Black disabled lives, are valuable. My works must provide a counter-narrative to the dominant popular narrative that depict disabled people as invalid. I am tired of looking at CNN and seeing the Shriners Hospital inspiration porn commercials that makes views feel pity for disabled people in hopes of raising money. We need to see more images and media of disabled people depicted as full human beings.
Thank you, Latif.
Hi, everyone. My name is David James Savarese. I am an alternatively communicating autistic, a writer, teacher, optimist, and artful activist. I am a white man with glasses, a goatee, and short, reddish-brown hair, wearing a solid black turtleneck. As a former foster child, I know what it's like to fight hard not to be thrown away and forgotten. As an optimist, I believe not only that nobody is disposable, but that everybody is indispensable. We are all essential and meaningful participants of something larger than ourselves. Zero. How?
Thank you to both. I really like the connection to the idea of being dispensable. I love that. We're not only to be tolerated, but we are to be celebrated, and we surely celebrate each other, and that's what we're doing today. So my first question for you both is, what is your aesthetic of resistance? Because you're both artists and you're both activists. So what is your aesthetic of resistance, and how do you see that tied to the Nobody is Disposable Coalition?
The # Nobody is Disposable campaign states that no one should die in this pandemic because of their disability. That is where the disabled artist comes in. The disabled artist can use his or her art to create a more realistic description of disabled people. We can make sure that our real life experiences are in our art so that the public will have realistic representations of disabled people's lives. This will assist to change the culture so disabled lives will have more value in society. Because if people have more realistic representations in our media of disabled people, they will have less fear when they encounter us in real life society. I think the fear of the unknown regarding disability is what fuels some of the ableism that we experience in society. So in the # No One Is Disposable campaign, do the important work of humanizing our disabled lives to the wider public.
Beautiful, thank you. And DJ?
I identify as an alternatively communicating synesthete, a severely apraxic autistic with, as Jill Major would say, nerves out to there, beyond my physical body, and I write from that experience, that stance of beyond borders, beyond momentary agency. What does that mean? It means I belong to a vast ecosystem, not simply to some city or state or country, not just to some gender, ethnicity, race, or class, but to the universe, a vast place, ultimately devoid of any man-made borders. It means to me the world is astonishingly, sometimes even confusingly, alive. The categories human and non-human crumble like a sandcastle at the beach, and the white, frothy wave of my attention spreads generously over everything. And because I need help to do things neurotypicals take for granted, from tying my shoes to wiping my mouth, my sense of agency is much less individualistic, much less human-centered. I see that we are all interdependent, not independent, that we yearn for self-efficacy, not self-reliance. That means we need to pay attention to the how of what we do. It's not enough to simply try to climb up the dominant culture's power structure or be included. I often refer to our society as the cultivated garden of a speech-based society. If I adopt that model as a given, as the only way of being, then my only hope to avoid being weeded out, so to speak, is to become an exception to the rule. But if, instead, I see life as a field of diverse and interconnected rhizomes, what some might call weeds, then I begin to undermine what keeps us dutifully stuck in an inclusion-exclusion coupling in which some bodies are seen as disposable and others not. We can't change who we are, we can only change the hopeful ways we relate to each other. So, in my work I strive to show myself not as the exception, but as one of many lives in progress. I look to plants and microbes as role models for new ways of being in the world.
Thank you to both. Wow, those are so powerful. I am one I am really a big fan of rhizomes. I utilize it a lot in my work, and I'm always thinking about those boundaries between the human and non-human and what that means at the interstices of both, right? And that's where it lays possibility and a possibility for rethinking and reimagining disabled lives and our worth through the medium of art, right? Which is what you both work with. So the next question I have is for Lateef. Black disabled people are treated at a much higher risk to be killed by police. Studies show that numbers are substantial, likely between 1/3 and 1/2 of total police killings. We also know about the disproportionate impact of COVID on Black and Brown communities due to structural inequality. Lateef, I know you're involved with Sense and Valid and other disability justice projects, and that your work speaks directly to the systemic oppression and violence to which Black disabled communities are subjected to in this society. Could you share some of your thoughts about this and how this work ties again into the message behind the Nobody is Disposable campaign?
With the COVID-19 pandemic and with the epidemic of police state violence, we see that Black disabled communities are in a vulnerable position in this country because being at near the bottom of our society's hierarchical structure. We see that this segment of the population have less opportunity to protect themselves from the virus through self-isolation and seclusion, and also less resources to treat the disease when they unfortunately get infected. It is not surprising that more of us are dying from the virus. Also, with the epidemic of police state violence, the cause is the same. It is because police recognize that Black, Indigenous, and other people of color with disabilities are not valued in our society, that police think they have license to abuse and sometimes murder this population. We then, as the BIPOC disabled community, have to be in the constant advocation of ourselves to reverse this paradigm. We also need to partner with the larger Black liberation movement to make sure that the slogan Black Disabled Lives Matter is part of our strategy as we try to eliminate having state-sanctioned violence done to our people.
Thank you so much, Lateef. And what you just said really makes me think of what DJ was pointing to, which is interdependence, right? There has been this impossible expectation of independence placed on disabled people, right? Which is not the way we operate. And actually, that's where our strength is. So what people think is our weakness is where our strength is. So this is the idea of an interdependence is really tied to collective liberation, and that of course needs to center the Black liberation movement. Absolutely. Okay, so then I have a question for you, DJ. You call yourself an artful activist rather than artful advocate. Can you explain what you see as the difference between these, and why do you choose to identify as an artful activist?
I think advocacy seeks to reform and activism seeks to transform. Activism is a call for action, a shifting of human relationships in our world. It's about actively disrupting the misassumptions upon which the status quo is founded.
I really like the idea of transformation versus reformation, right? And we often think about reformist reforms and how much those really derail the real transformation and reshuffling of social relations that really make it possible to rethink and reimagine the world we live in. So yeah, it's really important to think about what kinds of quote unquote diversity initiatives and programs, what they really are silencing. And I think it's important that we think about those critically. So then I have a question for the both of you now. How do you use poetry? Oh no, sorry, this is not my question actually. This is a question that Latif has for DJ. Am I correct, Latif? Should I, okay.
I have a question for DJ. How do you use poetry to illustrate and explain how you see the world that may be different from other people?
Latif, I love this question so much, thank you for asking it. Poetry moves associatively, not linearly. It finds commonalities about seemingly disparate things. It doesn't just make broad claims and ask details to be subordinate. Poetry offers a way of communicating with the reader in a way that alters both of us. It seeds possibility, encourages people to open up. In the film, as in my life, I am tracing a path through the world that others can follow, discovering and experimenting with the limitations and power of language, both oppressive and liberatory, and striving to find newer, more engaging and inclusive ways to tell my story. However, instead of a storied knowledge, I appeal to a poetic knowledge. I do this in part because poetry, with its foregrounding of the sensorial and the metaphorical, offers the closest alphabetical translation to my experience, and in part because for me, storied implies narrative and narrative denotes a certain structure which is itself oppressively confining.
Thank you, Latif and DJ. There was a request for me to speak slower. I want to say that that's a bit of a competing access needs. It's not super easy for me to regulate the speed of my voice when I'm like handling this, but I will do my best. Thank you for pointing that out. So I do have a question for both Latif and DJ. In this emphatically oralist world, there has been push against the validity and value of AAC communication, which in turn invalidates and devalues the very lives of AAC communicators. What are the situations in which many alternatively communicating people live, and how are they put in danger?
I think the main way people who use AAC can be put in danger in this society is when our voices are not recognized as valid stenographers of our own experiences and are ignored. This turns into a nightmare if a person who uses AAC gets abused and her or his account of the experience get dismissed because of the mode of communication in which they use. This society has been obsessed with the normalization of an imagined ideal of able-bodiedness. Part of that imagined myth is the people who use AAC would be better communicating orally than with an AAC device, because then those people will be more normal. However, some people will be better served communicating with an AAC device. As a result, we as a society needs to be more accepted of people communicating with AAC devices and have that as a normalizing aspect of our culture.
Thank you so much.
Communication first estimates there are more than 5 million people of all ages in the United States who are unable to rely on speech alone to communicate. How many of those estimated 5 million people in the US have you encountered on a weekly or even yearly basis? My guess is less than a handful in a year. Misunderstanding, fear, and the lack of access to affordable and effective teaching strategies have rendered a significant number of non-speaking people invisible, disposable, and or perceived as burdens to society. Presumed incompetent and denied training in literacy and communication skills, most non-speaking people are segregated in separate classes or schools for kids with disabilities, denied basic human rights, and later housed in sheltered workshops, group homes, and larger residential placements. COVID-19 has brought to people's attention that these are life and death circumstances, but sadly, most alternative communicators endure these inhumane conditions daily. The good news is Latif and I are no longer the exceptions. Since I graduated from college in 2017, the number of non-traditional speakers attending college and university has increased 20-fold.
Thank you, Deej, and Latif. So I have a request. So I'll ask DJ, what are some of the differences you found between film and poetry as forms of artful activism?
Because of my lived experience, I choose to use artful activism to change people's misperceptions and unfounded assumptions about the way schools segregate kids. Confronted with a new idea in the form of an angry protest, people often get defensive and fearful. I've found that art can lower people's defenses and open their eyes to new ways of both seeing and being, allowing my perceived adversaries to become my fresh-thinking allies. Very strong emotions often confound us by sabotaging our best intentions. Maybe you're afraid your idea will offend someone you really like or depend on. Making a poem or play speak for you can allow you to say what you're feeling without having to be there for their response. In this way, art allows you to explore emotions without losing yourself in them. Art can also offer you room to create an alternative world. By trying out something new, you might creatively show people that their assumptions about you or the world we live in are unfounded. I think allowing them to make these discoveries on their own is more effective than dictating what they ought to think or feel. Specifically, for me, Film offers a chance to show people their misperceptions. People think their way of knowing is the one and only way. They don't acknowledge multiple and neurodiverse ways of knowing and growing. They make assumptions about us based on what they see us do. They don't realize our bodies don't always follow our commands. Because we communicate in non-traditional ways, they don't ask us to join them at the table, and they unquestioningly define us by their misassumptions, and then consider themselves qualified to limit our potential accordingly. Film allows me to juxtapose those outsider assumptions with the truth of my insider's lived experience, to offer them a series of aha moments over the course of the film. It matters to me that I'm heard, and film allows me to send my ideas across a vast space over a long period of time. Film also brings whole communities together, allowing them to see collectively what they don't even know they don't know. It engages people, brings them together, and offers opportunities for me to engage with a community more deeply by teaching classes, workshops, trainings, giving readings, and/or facilitating meetings with stakeholders in that community. Done right, it's also accessible to everyone. And poetry is my native language. It's the closest alphabetic translation can come to approximating my lived experience. It's what lured me into literacy in the first place, so I prefer to use it. Because it's multimodal and activates the senses, poetry dislodges us from a strictly meaning-based experience and frees ideas to mingle across boundaries of the brain. In this way, people let go of, and move beyond, preconceived abstract concepts, artificial, classificatory constructions of power, and mere exercises in political correctness. In short, poetry is a way to open us up to be less didactic. I could talk about this for days, but I guess the last thing I'd say is this. I think being wary of the exceptional overcoming narrative is important for each of us. It's not enough for us to simply fill in the blanks of the overcoming narrative with the specific details of our own lives. While it may feel gratifying at first, it doesn't lead to real change.
Thank you, DJ. Well, I love learning about those media because I am not somebody who's good at poetry or at film. I do appreciate both. My world is the word, but in a very different way from yours. So I do appreciate poets, although I can rarely understand, which I also think has a lot of power. You know, it's like someone's inner world that you cannot always reach. And I feel that that's has a very powerful aesthetic nature to it. So I want to just touch briefly on the fact that it's a really sweet coincidence that the three of us are trained anthropologists. Actually, I went to the same program that Latif is right now finishing at the California Institute of Integral Studies, and I know that DJ majored in English and anthropology. And I think that well, we know that there is no secret that the anthropology as a discipline has had a very tortuous relationship with the colonial project. And I think that younger generations of anthropologists, such as ourselves, are charged with reimagining our field and called to boycott extractivism, right? When you extract knowledge and you extract ideas from communities, and then you utilize that to glorify yourself by writing a book and putting it up on a shelf and not necessarily contributing to the community's agendas. So it's really important that we boycott extractivism, that we lead by obeying, which is a Zapatista saying, and that we actively contribute to the political agendas led by the groups we work in solidarity with. So this question is for Latif. Latif, how do you see the role of activist ethnography in documenting, amplifying, and giving back to campaigns such as Nobody is Disposable.
As an anthropologist, I see myself as the way to amplify and record to people that I co-research with. It is imperative that I listen and follow the example of people that will be in my ethnography, especially since this first ethnography will be covering the experiences of other people who use AAC. I need to make sure that their voices are expressed the way that they want it in the work, especially because the voices of people who use AAC are often ignored in the wider society.
Thank you, Latif. I fully agree. And, I'm very fond of the co-researching process. I had the most wonderful grassroots co-researchers, both autistic leaders in service provision for autistic and otherwise neurodivergent youth, ACAT. Which is a transition program in Berkeley, and the process that we shared was so powerful in terms of realizing how much researchers who live at this sort of periphery of the academy have to abide by academic standards, and how much that really tramples over the political agendas of the people you're co-researching with. So it's a very different balance to strike. So I really appreciate the self-reflection in which activist ethnography really requires researchers and researchers who live at the intersection of multiply marginalized identities like ourselves, and how much we really need to engage with that kind of work and understand that contributing to that is contributing to the message behind Nobody is Disposable campaign, especially when we think about knowledge produced by grassroots communities who are also marginalized communities. So I have the last question. I have a guest appearance by my kitty right here. Sorry about that. This is to both of you to close. You're both wonderful poets and otherwise artful activists. Would you consider joining creative resistance forces in the future? I would be right there, first row, whatever it is you birth together.
Yes, I would love to work with DJ on some poetic project. That sounds wonderful. I am always willing to work with other writers and poets in the cause of social justice.
Awesome, I can't wait.
Latif, I have to confess, I asked for you to be on the panel precisely in the hope that we could collaborate in the future. I hope to engage with you both as board members for the Alliance for Citizen-Directed Support and on a future poetry project based on the work of a talented young artist. And I welcome any other opportunities you might suggest.
That's really cool. I'm really looking forward to your collaboration. As I said before, the three of us know each other in different context, so it would be really cool to come together somehow, even if I'm just witnessing your work. I'm excited for that. And can I please get a time check? 9:43.
Time to go into their poems. And
Great.
then DJ and Latif, I have sent you 2 of the audience questions you can begin to prepare remarks for. And after the poems, we'll have Jessica.
Excellent, thank you. So DJ, Latif, we would love for you to share some of your poetry with us, please.
I am going to read the first poem in my new book, Whispers of Crip Love, Shouts of Crip Revolution, entitled I'm Too Pretty for Some Ugly Laws, because I think it goes with the theme of tonight of # No One Is Disposable. I am too pretty for some ugly laws. I am not supposed to be here in this body, here speaking to you. My mere presence of erratic moving limbs and drooling smile used to be scrubbed off the public pavement. Ugly laws used to be in many U.S. cities' law books, beginning in Chicago in 1867, stating that any person who is diseased, maimed, mutilated, or in any way deformed so as to be an unsightly or disgusting object, or an improper person to be allowed in or on the streets, highways, thoroughfares, or public places in the city, shall not therein or thereon expose himself to public view, under the penalty of $1 for each offense. Any person who looked like me was deemed disgusting and was locked away from the eyes of the upstanding citizens. I am too pretty for some ugly laws, too smooth to be shut in, too smart and eclectic for any box you put me in. My swagger is too bold to be swept up in these public streets. You can stare at me all you want. No cop will bust in my head and carry me away to an institution. No doctor will diagnose me a helpless invalid with an incurable disease. No angry mob with clubs and torches will try to run me out of town. Whatever you do, my roots are rigid like a 100-year-old tree. I will stay right here to glare at your ugly face too.
I think I'll read the first poem in my chapbook entitled A Doorknob for the Eye. I recently launched a digitized version of the book for free in the hopes of making it more accessible. The first poem, entitled Blanching Jet Maneuver, is written about Stephen Wiltshire, who is famous for drawing urban skylines after just a 20-minute helicopter ride over them. It gets at the heart of what it means to be labeled. Set up with a huge blank canvas and a number of pens, Stephen reconstructs the skylines in exhibition or gallery spaces, all eyes on him.
Blanche Inkjet Maneuver by DJ Savarese for Stephen Wiltshire. He has 2 days to bring all of London to life. 2 days and 30 pens. The human camera, or so he's been dubbed, draws from memory. One jaunt in a helicopter over New York, Berlin, or Rome, and the metropolis in all of its perspectival glory, passes into art. Savant, says the neurologist. Automaton, claims the art historian. Skill without animating vision, the hyperreal without discernible feeling. To elude predators, the inking cephalopod releases a diffuse cloud of dark pigment, which it then disperses with the jet of water. Stephen's pen works like this. Call it hippocampal subterfuge. The crowd in the museum has come to gawk at the effete spectacle, a working-class black man turned robotic scrivener. What the audience doesn't understand is that Stephen has already swum away. In his place, a more substantial cloud of blackened mucus, a spectral Houdini.
Beautiful, 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 both of your poems. Are you all going to read another one? Are you going to share another one? Or are we going to get into these questions we have from the audience?
So this is Emily speaking. At this time, we'd like to ask Jessica Lehman to come on.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry, Jessica. Yes.
And she's
Yes.
going to share a little bit more about the No Body is Disposable. And then Latif and DJ, we've sent 2 questions. If we'll probably have time for you to each answer one of them.
Thank you so much. My name is Jessica Lehman. I'm with Senior and Disability Action. I'm really honored to be a part of this tonight. You all have shared such incredible work, and I really appreciate your comments. So thank you for everything you are doing. Wanted to say something about the comments about COVID and how it is affecting disabled people in the intersection between ableism and racism. And unfortunately, in this pandemic, we are seeing ableism, ageism, and racism, I think, at their worst. DJ mentioned people living in care facilities who are separated from society, dying from COVID, without people really doing much about it. And now we're hearing about hospitals filling up, that there may not be enough ICU beds or enough ventilators. And there's a very real concern that if hospitals have to decide who to treat, they will deprioritize disabled people and seniors, because our lives are typically assumed to be less valuable, especially if we are also queer or people of color or hold another marginalized identity. We also know that people of color are more likely to have certain health conditions because of our inequitable healthcare system and a myriad of other factors. And so people of color may further be deprioritized for treatment. So the reason I came on here is to ask you all to take action. That I know in this time, it's finding that balance of the cultural sustenance to feed us and then the opportunity to do something. And so I want to invite you tonight to fight back against care rationing. First, thank you to the many advocates around the country working to improve state guidelines about crisis standards of care. The guidelines in various states have been improved dramatically, and a lot of references to disability have been taken out. But there is a lot more to be done. So there's a couple specific things that I believe are going to be in the chat momentarily. Oh, there they are, magic. So the first is the NoBodyIsDisposable Coalition is doing amazing work, and they put out a series of Know Your Rights guides. And so we urge you to click on the link, pass them on, so that if you or anyone you know does need to seek medical care for COVID, you know what your rights are and you can make sure that you are as protected as possible. Also, please post on social media with the hashtag NoBodyIsDisposable so we can spread that message now and beyond COVID that our lives are valuable. We're also doing a teach-in. This is actually the California Care Rationing Coalition, but I think this will have broader relevance, of course. We are doing a teach-in on care rationing called Who Gets to Live, Who Dies, and What You Can Do About It, next Tuesday, July 28th, from 3 to 4:30 p.m. Pacific time, 6 to 7:30 Eastern time. And in the chat is the link to the Facebook event and a link to sign up if you want to get the Zoom link. It will also be available on Facebook Live. And then lastly, in the chat, there's a Google Doc with some more ways that it includes the things I mentioned and some other ways that you can take action if you were interested in this. So thank you so much to participants for taking action. Again, thank you to the panel.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and I'm sorry that I almost didn't introduce you there. So we're going to have DJ and Lateef answer, I think, maybe one of the questions, one each.
I'll just read aloud the questions right now in case DJ and Lateef, you just have your answers. This is Emily speaking. What's making quarantine more bearable and pleasant for y'all? And doesn't the need to humanize ourselves through our art constrain what that art can and cannot say and place an overdue burden on us as disabled artists? There were so many wonderful questions asked in the Q&A box too. So we'll make sure to share those with you all in case you're at all able to answer some of those later on your social media.
I'm creating webinars, connecting with friends old and new, digitizing my chapbook, applying for fellowships and grants, helping the Alliance for Citizen-Directed Supports, and writing. I think we do have undue burdens, but I also think writing about a range of topics displays our humanness.
What makes quarantine ribble is all these Zoom meetings keeping me busy.
That's a great segue to the fact that Lateef will be on some of our upcoming weekend programs this weekend. I want to take a moment to thank Sarah, DJ, and Lateef for all of your comments today, and DJ especially for sharing the film with us all. Again, I've been getting lots of messages from people saying that this panel is just absolutely blowing their minds. So I'm glad I'm not alone there, and thank you all. Our wonderful help co-organizer Reagan is going to post some last bit of information into the chat. This event and all of our programming that we've been doing has been free, but if you are feeling motivated and inspired and you're in a place where you can make a donation, we are asking not for any of the organizing organizations, but for some donations to some of the organizations that are doing very important work right now connected to No Body is Disposable. And lastly, there's a link to the third film in our summer No Body is Disposable series, which will include a film from Sins Invalid, an unclaimed shame to beauty, and another panel discussion that I expect to be just as vibrant as today's was, with Patty Byrne, Maria Palacios, India Carval. I'm blanking on her name. Sorry, I shouldn't have said names. I also didn't share them with the interpreters in advance. So apologies, but you can go ahead and register. We'll get those names on there accurately and so you can see the panel. And with that, I would love to just close it out. And to our panelists, just imagine that there's a room full of applause that you deserve to hear, although unfortunately you can't right now. So thank you all for joining us, and until the next one.
Thank you so much.
India Harvile, thank you. Somebody help.
White text on a black background reads, "Thank you for watching." Please visit us on Facebook at SFSU Disability, on Twitter at LongmoreInst, or online at longmoreinstitute.sfsu.edu.